What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video, as it is Star Wars Day, i.e. May the 4th be with you, I'm going to be running a Star Wars related team in the Go Battle League, and you might be wondering, what do these Pokemon have to do with Star Wars? Well, it's got nothing to do with their designs resembling any characters from the Star Wars franchise, but instead because they all have the Force, or moves that have the word Force in them, with both Mienshao and Lucario on Force Palm, and Giratina on Shadow Force. Now it is worth mentioning that Shadow Force is a legacy move, so I had to use an Elite Charge DM just for this video, and it also happens to be the worst signature move of any Pokemon in the entire game, dealing 120 damage, but also costing a whopping 90 energy. Now for some perspective, Clanging Scales also deals 120 damage, but it literally costs half as much energy. Now obviously Clanging Scales is the most efficient move in the entire game, but it is a signature move. They're supposed to be good, and Shadow Force certainly is not that. Also, outside of Struggle, which is just a complete meme of a move, Shadow Force is the highest energy charge move in the game, and it just feels like it takes an absolute eternity to get to. So I think in the 4 sets that I'm going to be showcasing in this video, I only used it like 2 or 3 times. So yeah, that might be the most pointless Elite TM I've ever used. So if you appreciate my commitment to a theme team, please make sure you leave a like and hype the video. And with that being said, let's get into the question of the day. Aside from Shadow Force, what do you think is the most underwhelming signature move in Pokemon Go PvP, and how would you change it to make it more viable? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Let's go into the first battle, leading Shadow Giratina into Altaria. Not the best matchup for me, but a lead matchup where I'm kind of forced to stay in because I do have 2 fighting-type Pokemon in the back which won't appreciate a Sky Attack or a Flamethrower. They go for Sky Attack. I expect the opponent to try and swap out and make a catch, so I do not throw straight away. They come in with a Tinkaton. Shadow Force, huge damage. It does also have a really cool animation, and that might have thrown the opponent off guard there as Lucario comes in, fully Force Palm farms them down before they have time to react. That is huge for me. We can now fire off a Meteor Mash. Meteor Mash, gonna be no shielded. It doesn't quite get the KO from that range, but Lucario still got 2 shields. I'm gonna use the first one. They swap out into Feraligatr, their final Pokemon, and this honestly looks like it's game over. The opponent is gonna shield the Aura Sphere. They throw straight away, but I really don't mind that at all. I'm just gonna no shield this. Mienshao can come in, and we don't even need to throw a charge move. The opponent is gonna throw on perfect timing. However, it will not allow them to reach back to back, as of course one more Force Palm gets the full farm down. I can Force Palm, farm down Altaria as well, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. We're going to see Giratina into Feraligatr in the lead this time around. So I'm actually going to swap out straight away into my Mienshao, as Giratina, of course, going to take super effective damage from those Shadow Claws. They're going to come in with Gorgeist, but we do have access to Brutal Swing, and Brutal Swing is going to deal some decent damage. And if they commit to a full farm down, I'm going to reach a second Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing, number 2, going to be shielded. And at this point, they do get quite a hefty farm down. They already have 80 energy, I believe, or at least they've got 60 energy. Either way, I'm going to no-shield the first move. They full send a Shadow Ball, but we get the Shadow Claw farm down, which is huge for me. We swap out into Lucario, and the opponent's final Pokemon is going to be Empoleon. So that's a really positive matchup for Lucario in the end game. All I need to do is get rid of Feraligatr. I'm going to overfarm as much as possible, and this is now game over. If they shield here, we commit our final shield. We go for a full Force Palm farm down. I'm going to come out with another Aura Sphere loaded, and this is super effective damage into Empoleon coming back in. Of course, Aura Sphere gets the one shot, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's well there into the next battle. We're going to see Drapion in the lead. So again, not a great matchup for the Giratina. Going to be, say, swapping into Mienshao. This time met with a non-shadow Kanto Marowak. I'm going to full send a Grass Knot, guarantee either the KO or a shield from the opponent. And at this point, I'm actually going to shield here as I want to get all shields from my opponent. Now, unfortunately, I thought I'd reach a Brutal Swing as they get to another Bone Club, but that is not quite the case. However, I feel like if I shield here, the opponent very likely going to try and fight for switch advantage, so they're going to maintain alignment, and as a result, we can grab that final shield. Now, is that going to allow me to land a Shadow Force in the end game? Well, we're going to find out. We're going to come in with Lucario. The opponent is going to chip with the Archetype, and the opponent going to choose to stay in with the Drapion. Now, I don't know what they've got in the back here, but clearly they don't want to see Lucario. I'm going to wait to see what they swap into. It's going to be Credilli in the back. We go for Meteor Mash. That does huge damage. We choose not to throw any more energy, as that way I can come in with Giratina, get the Shadow Claw farm down. The opponent, recognizing with that farm down, there is nothing they can do there, and so they just concede the match. So, GG's on there, into next battle, I see Unova and Stunfisk in the lead. Now, I feel like this is a matchup where I can full send a Shadow Force, and the opponent is very unlikely to shield. So the opponent goes for Mud Bomb. Mud Bomb not going to deal too much damage here, but they can spam these Mud Bombs a lot faster than I can reach a Shadow Force. But we now have the energy. We farm up to very close to 100. We go for Shadow Force. Shadow Force, gonna connect, but it actually doesn't quite put them into range where I can Shadow Claw farm them down, and Giratina not even going to win the zero shield scenario after full sending a Shadow Force. And to make things worse, they've got Talonflame in the back. There is literally nothing I can do here unless the opponent, for whatever reason, no shields to Dragon Claw, but they're going to shield. They're also likely going to go for a Flame Charge. There is nothing Lucario can do, so I'm going to come in with Lucario and then just concede the match. So there you can see Shadow Force not really doing that well in that matchup there, but into the next battle, we're going to see Primeape in the lead, so I'm just going to stay in here, of course, double resisting the Karate Chop damage. The opponent going to go for a super effective Rage Fist. They are going to look to try and swap and catch a Dragon Claw onto the Drapion, but that's absolutely fine with me. I'm going to come in with Lucario. The opponent going to go for the Aqua Tail. I can now go for an Aura Sphere just before they do reach a second Aqua Tail, and of course, this is going to get the KO. The opponent, they are going to come back in with a Shadow Camerupt, which is really cool to see. I did see that Hope/Henry put out a video with this Pokemon recently, so maybe this is that team, I'm not really sure. Either way, it doesn't really matter, as I'm going to go for a Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw, well, the opponent going to shield, but they're looking to throw on good timing. That allows me to reach a second Dragon Claw, grabbing both shields, and now the opponent farms up to 100 energy. Now, they can store back-to-back charge moves here. However, the opponent maybe not expecting a Mean Shower to come in, so we force palm farm them down before they can react, and as a result, we can reach a Brutal Swing. It's resisted damage, but it certainly takes out the Primeape from that range, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there, into the next battle, we're going to see a Malamar in the lead. So this is not a great matchup for us either, but also not really one where I can swap out into my Mean Shout, as of course Psywaves are going to hit for super effective damage. So I'm looking to play out the zero shield scenario here. If they do actually let the Dragon Claw go through, I might actually swap into my Lucario, looking for the Force Palm Snipe, but barely not able to get it before they do reach a departing Superpower. Superpower would very easily one-shot us there, so I'm forced to use my shield, but now they come in with a Tinkaton. Both Aura Sphere and Meteor Mash going to hit for neutral damage. Meteor Mash is going to hit harder, however, and the opponent looking to massively overfarm here, allowing me to reach a second one. The opponent not going to double shield, maybe expecting a bait that time around, but no, the opponent, at this point, they have just completely given up here. We can come in, Force Palm, farm down for Alligator, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's over there, into next battle, we're going to see Grimmsnarl in the lead, so Giratina just cannot catch a break in the lead right now. I'm going to be swapping into Mean Shout, and this should just be a foul play, or potentially a power-up punch. Either way, it is going to not deal, well, I was going to say not deal that much damage. That was a lot of damage there, which kind of forces me to go straight for Brutal Swing. However, they came in with Quagsire, one of the only Pokemon where I could have actually gone for one more Force Palm, lived 2 Mud Shots, and potentially one-shot them with the Grass Knot, but of course, I didn't know what was going to come in there. I couldn't take that risk, because if they came in with anything with remotely decent fast refresher, I would have gone down. But either way, we're going to swap out into Lucario, and it doesn't matter in the end, as they've got Ferrothorn in the back. That's going to be game over. The opponent, recognizing that, they don't bother shielding. We Force Palm, farm down the Grimmsnarl, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there, into the next battle, I see Jellicent in the lead. Now, this is going to be a Pokemon that my team is going to struggle with in general. However, in the lead is definitely where we want to see it. They're going to swap into Shadow Drapion. I come in with Lucario, as I realize, of course, this Pokemon has 0 play up against the Jellicent. However, that single Aqua Tail has put me into range where the opponent can come in, and if they maybe don't expect me to go and full send a Shadow Ball here, they can just no-shield this and then commit to a monstrous full Hex Farm down. They come out with so much energy, and this puts me in a really awkward position, as I just cannot afford to double shield my Shadow Giratina, so I will shield the first there, as I don't expect them to bait. However, this time around, Shadow Ball is going to connect. It does huge damage. I swap out, expected the opponent to try and snipe me with a Pokemon in the back, and unfortunately, that does not work out at all, as the opponent stays in, they fire off the Surf, they grab my final shield, and whilst I'm dealing insane damage with the Force Palms, the opponent able to reach a Psychic Fangs before I can fully farm them down, or before I reach 3 charge moves up against Molpeko, and so unfortunately, I end up losing that game. But GG to opponent into the next battle. Going to see a Dusclops in the lead. So this is once again going to be quite tricky for my entire team. However, Giratina is going to have a sort of neutral-ish matchup here. However, you're going to see I'm not going to be able to reach a Shadow Force. I'm forced to settle for just the Dragon Claw, but Dragon Claw is going to be shielded by the opponent. I don't mind shielding here as I can reach another Dragon Claw, but actually, never mind. I'll just completely disregard what I said there. I guess I'm thinking of a different game. But either way, I'm now going to come in with the Mean Shao as they fire off the Shadow Punch, and I'm going to go for a Brutal Swing, trying to throw on CMP, but the opponent makes a really nice play there, expecting that. And so they swap a resisted Brutal Swing, or sorry, they swap and catch a resisted Brutal Swing onto their Azumarill. And of course, I do have coverage in Grass Knot. However, it doesn't quite get the KO there. I'm thinking maybe if I shield this, I can then reach another Brutal Swing as I get the full farm down. So if they come back in with the Dusclops, we've got it already loaded, but they play very smartly there, instead coming in with Bastiodon, tanking the energy, which doesn't do much damage, and then swapping out back into the Dusclops. And unfortunately, that's going to be game over, as the opponent will be able to reach back-to-back Shadow Punches before I get to the Meteor Mash. And of course, Shadow Punch number 2 gets the KO there. They can just Hex, farm down my Mean Shao, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's over there into the next battle. We are going to see a Malamar in the lead once again. This time around, I'm actually going to play this differently. Look to try and swap and catch a foul play onto my Lucario, where of course that is resisted damage. The opponent now going to come in with an Aegislash, which isn't ideal as they do resist everything I can possibly throw here. Of course, I'm not running like Blaze Kick or Shadow Ball. However, with just resisted damage, honestly, Lucario is dealing a ton of damage here. Meteor Mash, gonna get them low. We get them into the red health range with just resisted moves. That is honestly kind of insane. At this point, I believe they have farmed up to back-to-back charge moves, and just in case I try to make a catch or something, they end up going for a Gyro Ball there. It doesn't really make a difference, as both Gyro Ball and Shadow Ball do cost the same energy, but I'm now going to shield the next charge move. We come back in with the Giratina, and the opponent is now going to come back in with Malamar. We go for Dragon Claw, going to be shielded. I tried to swap and catch the next move there, but honestly, I think I swapped out too soon. I couldn't remember if they stayed in at all up against my Lucario, but either way, we're going to go for Brutal Swing, and the opponent does not commit to a full farm down. This is huge for me, as Thunder Punch will get the KO, but now we can come in with the Giratina, and whilst they will reach a Blast Burn, we do resist this. Giratina in its Shadow form, just barely able to hang on, coming out with a Dragon Claw loaded, and Dragon Claw neutral damage. It will get the KO up from that range into the Malamar, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the next battle. I can see Shadow Altaria in the lead this time around. So once again, we're going to choose to stay in here. I should be able to live a Sky Attack, which they will reach one turn before we get to Dragon Claw, but that's absolutely okay. I'm going to no-shield this. Again, I wait just to make sure the opponent does not make a catch. This time around, they stay in with Altaria, and because it's a Shadow, I actually don't feel too bad about this matchup with my Lucario, as I'm going to shield anyways. But actually, my Force Palms, even resisted damage, is really starting to add up to the point where I think Aura Sphere, resisted damage, should be enough damage to KO here. So Aura Sphere will get the knockout. Then I'm going to come in with a Shadow Fortress, and I'm already at Aura Sphere number 2. Aura Sphere gonna deal big damage. My Switch Clock is now coming up, so I'm going to swap back into my Shadow Giratina to catch a Sand Tomb. Now, I don't know what they've got in the back here, so I'm just going to wait out my Switch Clock, as of course I'm Switch Locked. I'm going to come in with the Mean Shout. They're going to have a Shadow Lapras. These Force Palms absolutely shredding through their HP. Likewise, Sidewaves non-stab damage also absolutely chunking, but we get the full farm down. The opponent realizing it's game over, and so they just concede the match. So, GG's on there into the next battle. Really tricky lead matchup for me as I lead into a Shadow 2 Cannon. I actually swap out there into Mean Shao, which is probably the worst matchup I have. However, of course, I am still dealing big damage with my Force Palms, but if they want to shield once, they can now just commit to a full farm down. So maybe I should have swapped into my Lucario, despite the fact that I know that is my better matchup up against this Toucannon, just because, well, actually, never mind, as the opponent allows a full farm down anyways. I'm definitely not going to complain there. They now come in with a Mudshot Diggersby, and I'm going straight for the Aura Sphere. Aura Sphere is going to connect. It doesn't quite get the one shot, but the opponent has a triple normal team. There is nowhere for my Shadow Giratina to go, and really nice play there on the opponent's end, recognizing that I would swap out of that matchup because I didn't want to tank a Fire Punch onto Lucario, which means they can come in with a Licky Licky, full send a Shadow Ball, put me into perfect range where they can just roll out, farm me down. And unfortunately, despite the fact that I do have Lucario and a shield advantage, they've got energy on both their remaining Pokemon, on Ice Shield. They're actually on Earthquake as well. Can we live a Fire Punch? This is non-stab. This is Diggersby. But it still takes out Lucario. And unfortunately, I do lose that game. Alright, so go into the next battle. We're going to see Greninja in the lead, so not the best matchup for me. I'm going to stay in here, look to try and catch a Night Slash onto my Mean Shout, and I'm able to do exactly that. Night Slash is resisted damage. They're now going to come in with a Shadow Jumpluff, and you know what? I'm going to look to farm up like I've got a potential Stone Edge, and Brutal Swing is going to grab a shield because of the threat of that Stone Edge. We can now reach a second Brutal Swing as they fully commit to a full farm down, but they do have quite a lot of energy. Giratina, either way, going to be able to soak up some of this damage here as the opponent clearly not on acrobatics as they just go and settle for an Aerial Ace. They're going to go for a second Aerial Ace straight away, fine with me. They do still have quite a lot of energy, so I am going to just not mess around. Instead, going to go for the Dragon Claw straight away. The opponent going to come back in with Greninja. I'm swapping into Lucario, and they throw here, which means, of course, my Force Palm will register, and I will be taking out the Greninja. Their final Pokemon, going to be Licky Licky, and there is literally nothing they can do here. We've got so much energy. Aura Sphere, not going to be shielded. It gets the one shot, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's over into the next battle. We're going to see Ludicolo in the lead. So this is not the best matchup, but also my backline isn't exactly going to be that great into it either, just because they are going to be very spammy with those Weather Balls. So I'm just going to stay in here. I'm hoping that the opponents, well, they're going to be forced to either full send a Leaf Storm or like an Ice Beam or whatever. Otherwise, if they go for the Weather Ball, we can actually tank that and then reach another Dragon Claw. So Dragon Claw number 2 going to grab both shields from the opponent, which is quite surprising, but they do have quite a lot of energy. So unfortunately, I believe they will reach back-to-back Weather Balls here, just barely before I am able to fully farm them down or reach a Brutal Swing of my own. So I'm actually going to swap out their final Pokemon, oh sorry, not their final Pokemon, their second Pokemon is going to be a Lunatone. This should just be resisted damage, so I will no shield this. However, even a double resisted Rock Slide puts me into range where they will be able to sideway farm me down, unless I throw pretty much straight away there, and unfortunately they're going to have Soul Rock in the back as well. It's a really cool team there, presumably going to be a triple Weather Ball team there, but unfortunately they can just Psywave, farm down the Mean Shao, and I end up losing that game. But GG's to opponent into the next battle. I can see an Oven Stunfisk in the lead, and this time around, we're probably not going to full send a Shadow Force, especially since they end up swapping out into Scrafty anyways. Here, this should just be a Power-Up Punch. However, Mean Shao is so glassy that if I don't shield there, the opponents could probably actually just fully farm me down. But now we come out with a Grass Knot loaded, and this is super effective damage. Grass Knot, gonna deal huge damage there. That is very nice from the Mean Shao. The opponent's gonna go for Mud Bomb, that's fine with me. We're gonna come back in with Giratina. Their final Pokemon is going to be an Alolan Marowak, and we're going straight for Dragon Claw. Dragon Claw, gonna be no shielded, but the opponent recognizing that I will just be able to Shadow Claw farm them down, and so they concede the match. So, GG's to the opponent there into the final battle of this video, leading into Dunsparce. Not the best matchup for me whatsoever, so going to be swapping into Mean Shao, and I'm met with an Azumarill. However, we do have Grass Knot for this matchup. Grass Knot going to deal big damage, and now I can safely shield once and go for a full Force Palm farm down. The opponent goes for Ice Beam, doesn't really matter. These bubbles are chunking, but we do get the full farm down before they come in with a Typhlosion. Now, I'm hoping we can live one Incinerate here, and if we do, we can now reach back-to-back Brutal Swings. Mean Shao absolutely putting in the work for this final battle. The opponent, of course, gonna have to no shield there. Honestly, I could have maybe stayed in with the Giratina and tanked a Drill Run before swapping out, but either way, I feel like from full health here, of course, we are double resisting the rollout damage. I should just barely live a Drill Run on Lucario, so we fire off the Aura Sphere just in case we're not able to tank it, but we're gonna see Drill Run doesn't quite get the KO, and of course, double resisting the fast food pressure, we get the full farm down, we come out with the Aura Sphere loaded, and so the opponent just concedes the match. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now, if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated, and with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.